Oh, hello again. I come back on a short notice to discuss Lord of the Rings, specifically The Rings of Power, an Amazon show which is meant to tell a story about the Second Age of Middle-earth. I love Lord of the Rings, although I wouldn't say I'm some sort of expert on it. I've read the Silmarillion several times, as well as all the Lord of the Rings books, and I've listened to the audiobook of The Hobbit. And I skimmed through the songbooks. But I'm not someone who dug deep into every little section of the lore. I know it in a general manner, and hence I wish to see, from a generic basic lore perspective, how well does this hold up. I won't give a review for it because I feel like making a review on a small section of the story that they're trying to tell is a bit disingenuous. Instead, I wish to use these videos as a tool to follow along with the story, putting it into a concise recap with some attention to details and what I want to see from the story. As I'm making this video, 5 episodes are already out, although I've only watched 2 of them. I hope to deliver these in a quick manner, without watching ahead as I make each video. So let's keep this short and let's get right into it. We start our story off in Valinor, the land where the elves come from. Here we begin with the words, "Nothing is evil in the beginning." Not only do I outright disagree with that statement, we are then immediately shown kids bullying young Galadriel. So was it an ironic statement? And then they throw into our face a short-haired elf. Elves would prize their hair and grow it out because they find short hair to be disgraceful. Why the sudden change? At least explain it, and maybe I'd accept the explanation. But when sudden changes are made without any explanation, it seems like either incompetence or a deliberate defiling of Tolkien's art. But I'll try not focus on these changes for too long. This first interaction between young Galadriel and her brother seems to be just a simple foreshadowing. Hence, we are given our Chekhov's gun, so let's elaborate on what we're looking for. What is the floating of the swan and the kids sinking the swan foreshadow? What does her and her brother's conversation mean? She wishes to know if to follow the light in the sky or the reflection of that light in the water, yet her brother's answer is cut out in a whisper. What is the answer, and does she find it? And then we pan out, revealing the beautiful land of Valinor, and starting the First Age exposition. After some exposition, the story then pans out into a map, moving us from Valinor to Middle-earth. I love maps, and I love the fact that they use maps quite a bit throughout the show to keep us on track. Yet, here arises the first big issue. Why are we shown Middle-earth after the flood? Clearly, at this moment, Beleriand should still exist. Yet we're immediately shown a Second Age map of Middle-earth, and it's not like they're clueless to this fact, as we are then shown people floating in flooded land. I feel like showing the destruction of the flood on a map, and possibly having a scene with giant cities getting flooded, would have had such a huge impact, and would have provided to the audience a better explanation of the horrors that happened during the First Age, and truly how evil Morgoth is, rather than he turned off their light bulb and looks scary. But let me move on because I could stick to that topic for hours. We are quickly given another continuity error, and that is the existence of orcs in the Second Age. Although, I'll let them pass because the exact creation of orcs is debatable, and while it is still a stretch for them to be there now, I guess they didn't have much creativity to create another enemy for the heroes. I'll also note that I personally like the actress they chose for Galadriel. I think she fits the role fairly well with her looks. The acting though is a bit awkward. Moving on, we are then given a symbol left on her brother's dead body by Sauron. It kind of looks like a trident head, yet also looking slightly reminiscent of the Eye of Sauron. I really hope it's not the eye. That would be kinda on the nose. So let's keep our eyes on anything that resembles this symbol. We then get Galadriel climbing through the northern wastes in search of Sauron, and since this is technically still the exposition, we are thrown a couple more pieces of red meat. We get the fact that fire can be cold, which seems to be an indication of evil. Let's remember that. Also, we get to see Orc meddling with the power of the unseen world. What does that mean? Will this return? Let's look for that. And then we get to see the mark again, yet doesn't seem to clear anything up, just serves as our guide. Afterwards, we get our first Elven talk. I'm assuming we're getting Quenya, but what did this guy say? Hristarko? Is it snowing trolls? Or does he mean Lostarko, a snow troll? Let's move on. I have to mention a few things that bothered me. In certain moments, it feels like Galadriel's actor is just forcing herself not to blink, and this new elf dude completely doesn't look like an elf. Now, sure, technically elves are described as very much resembling humans, but being the most beautiful of humans. Yet this guy just seems to resemble some generic human who has fake ears attached. And worst of all, where is Galadriel's magic? How could you have Galadriel without her sorcery? That is literally her thing. One thing that bothered me in the Lord of the Rings movies is that we never get to see a sorcerer in their full power. The closest we get to it is Saruman casting storms, but even that is usually shown as some circumstantial magic causing a little snow to fall down a mountain. Why can't we get a full-powered Galadriel? Here, instead, they're reducing her to some sword swinger. But that is a hope for the future. Maybe they could still make her find that power. Despite the fact that she should already have that power by now, they still technically have time to make her a powerful sorceress. So I guess let's look out for that too. Now, if you rewatch the killing of the snow troll scene, watch how she kills the troll, and then it's a quick cut to where the troll is now gone, and then another awkward cut of her staring at something. It makes me think of Tom and Jerry levels of continuity issues. Then we get the scene of everyone giving up their arms. This is sort of to capitalize on Galadriel's character being overly ambitious. Fine, okay, yes, let's move on. And great, we get another map. Once again, I have an issue with it. What is Ered Luthui? This is clearly the northern section of Mordor, where Ered Luthui, the Ash Mountains, stand. But what are the Copper Mountains? I say let's watch out for this one. This could be something included to indicate that they used to be Copper Mountains, but some event will happen that will make them Ashen Mountains. Let's hope that level of attention was given, and this isn't some mistake, because I can't imagine someone making such an intentional mistake. But I guess let's go to where the story wants to take us, which is into the Rovanian Wilderlands. Here we get our introduction of the Proto Hobbits, or the Harflets. I find these pointless. Intriguing, but extremely pointless. This show has to really prove to me that there's a point for these things to exist, if they want to insert them into the lore. Currently, I find zero reason for them to be at all included in the story. We get ourselves a pseudo-Frodo and a pseudo-Sam. But let's move on from them, because all we get here is a little bit of context of the enemy for these Harflets, which is the wolves. We move over in our map to Lindon, where both of our characters, Galadriel and Elrond, shall be meeting. We get, once again, our fill of Quenya.
Alfiri menori, na meta avante, home.
I pala numen, I alfiri menori, na meta avante, and then apparently home. Roughly translating, Pala Numen is probably two words, Palan and Numen, most likely referring to far west, or in his reference to Valinor, with the E that can be substituted to be the. Alfirime is not a word, but Alfirine means immortal or undying. Nori is also not a word, but my assumption could be Nore, to run, or Norie, for country or land. I'll assume he means country. Na, to be or to be with. Meta, and in the end, Avante, refused or denied. Hence we get a rough translation of the far west, the immortal land, in the end denied to go home, or with the proper wording, I palan numen, I alfirine norie na meta avante mardi, technically speaking. Although I'm no expert at this, but the actor, he could at least try and roll his R's for this. He also isn't very elf looking. It's weird to see how if we go back to Galadriel's brother, he has very non-pointy ears, despite the fact that he should be very much an elf. While then we get Elrond, who is half elf, and he has extremely pointy ears, and wears the long dark hair and silver eyes. Most elves are meant to have long, dark black hair, but whatever. Quickly after, we get more elven. Lindonelie kavelisene? Or does he mean Lindonelie askavnelise? But it was close enough. Although on her end, she doesn't want to speak much elven. Next, we get to meet Gilgalad, who looks the best out of all the elves. He's got the dark hair, he's got the pointy ears, perfect. He's a pretty important fella. And as I understand, the elven that I previously translated is what is being read by Gilgalad.
In the blessed realm, the far west, the undying lands of Valinor, at last, they are going home.
He says, "In the blessed realm of the far west, the undying lands of Valinor, at last they are going home." From the original Elven that Elrond spoke, while some extra words were spliced in, the biggest thing I don't understand is how did the word Avante go from denied or refused and turn into going? Maybe they tried to take a bit of a stretch and take Ata, which means going or departing, with the 8th pronunciation of the term from the Parfethelian, which is pronounced as Avante. Even then, that pronunciation has a past tense inflection, so he would be saying they departed home, rather than they are going home, as if it already happened. So I can't tell, is this negligence or on purpose? Now, we must address all of Galadriel's talking points and reasoning. From all these conversations Galadriel has, they don't seem to establish why it is her specifically who wishes to seek out evil. Has she suffered more than any other elf? She hasn't. Almost all the elves there lived the life she has and suffered the things she has. What makes her special? What is it she experienced that no one else has? This is never explained, or at least not yet, and I really hope they don't end up making an entire segment of the story dedicated to what she saw. I also don't understand what they're trying to do with her character. She seems to come off as a self-centered and careless individual, which has been displayed many times over. But at times it seems like they're trying to portray her as someone who is suffering from PTSD, as she's unable to get the voices out of her head, while others tell her that if she was to leave, she can be helped, yet she refuses to listen to good advice. But in both depictions, it seems like the character's meant to be led into making a grave mistake that will hurt many around her, which will allow her character to grow and learn to either overcome her issues or to learn how to not be self-centered. So let's hope that is where the story leads and watch for her grave mistake she's planned to make. Back to the map again, we now move over to the land behind Mordor, the Southlands, a land of humans, and specifically humans that at one point joined the side of evil. And these humans are watched over by some elves. Here, we get to meet Arondir, our first ever black elf. Because you know, the Norse mythology where the elves come from, they had so many African Americans. But let's focus on how well he acts out his role, which at the moment is extremely bland. On one hand, this side story of the elf and human lady seems just unnecessary, just as much as the Harflets are. And they will really need to sell me on why this side story needs to exist. We have some sort of poisoning in this land where we get to see black milk coming out of the cow, which is a direct foreshadow for the upcoming conflict. As well as, we get a love story. These two have completely non-existing chemistry, and I see no reason for them to have any form of love story. We also get a comment from the other elf that there were only 2 human and elf marriages, but until that point there has been 5, based on how you define elf. We get to meet the human lady's son, who then apparently has some sort of broken evil dark sword with the Sauron symbol. This makes me extremely worried as to where they're trying to take this story, because I have so many ideas of where the story is trying to go with this kid, but almost all versions of the story I can imagine are horrible and dumb. Back to the elves as Galadriel sails off to the west. Elrond has a chat with Gilgalad, where I get the impression that both of them believe Galadriel, but just think she's too self-centered to continue acting as commander, and instead wish to handle the situation themselves. For this, Gilgalad brings the famed artisan named Celebrimbor, an extremely important figure in this. With this, the first episode wraps up setting up the 4 stories that we shall be following. Elrond and Celebrimbor are currently at Lindon, preparing for their big project. Arondir and Bronwyn headed east to see what has happened at the village in regards to some poisoning, leaving behind her child, Theo, alone in the village. Galadriel, on the boat, remembers the words that were whispered to her by her brother, which he told her that she needs to touch the darkness to see which light to follow. Why? Especially her response back then was, "But that seems so simple." Which I don't understand what's so simple about that. I would imagine that the statement, "a light in the water shining just as bright," is an indication that there are other paths that she can take that seem just like the right path, but are in fact wrong. Hence, the advice he gives her is, maybe just do the wrong thing, then you'll know what way's right, which honestly sounds like horrible advice. It's like saying to a child, you'd never know that a pan is hot unless you touch it and burn yourself. So based on that foreshadow, we can assume that Galadriel is taking the wrong path and jumps off the ship. I really hope that all these foreshadows of her just constantly taking the wrong actions and being a horrible person in the end are reflected back at her so she can learn from them. But moving on from that, our final fourth story is the Harflets, where next to them has just fallen a man and a comet. At the moment, Harflets have no purpose, so let's hope this brings them some purpose. With that, the episode concludes, leaving us with many questions. What is the floating of the swan and the kids sinking the swan foreshadow? What is this foreshadowed darkness that Galadriel is planning on touching to be able to see light? What does Sauron's symbol symbolize? And I hope it's not just an arbitrary design. Let's also look out for some cold fire. What are these otherworldly experiments that orcs have been conducting? Will Galadriel become a sorceress? And what's the point of the Harflets? I also have to point out that the fallen man in the comet is also juxtaposed with the leaf that has the dark goo on the back as Gilgalad picks it up. It feels like it's giving us a visual foreshadow of a pretty and innocent exterior that is hiding evil. Let's watch for that as well. And let me hope that I can make more videos more quickly and not sit on them for too long. But that's it for episode 1. Bye. Back. A big